The Prime Minister's warned police chiefs over what he calls a growing consensus that mob rule, I'm quoting him there, is overtaking the democratic right to protest.
He wants a more robust response from the authorities, but some say the PM is exaggerating the issue. Joining us to discuss this further is the former Director of Communications at Number 10 for John Major, a man, though, wearing a red tie this morning. Jonathan Haslam, good morning.
Good morning, Jeremy, and good morning, Rosie.
What was the Prime Minister trying to convey yesterday? He summoned the police chiefs in, he's given them sort of a very tough talking to. What's his main message? Well,
his main message is, could you please get these people off the streets because they're causing a nuisance, in my view. Or in his view, let's be precise about it. The thing we should remember here is politicians make lousy policemen and policemen aren't great politicians. They should stick to their own jobs. And like everything in life, it's not just black and white. Policing demonstrations is a very, very difficult art. I spent a lot of time with the Diplomatic Protection Group, the police officers who look after a Prime Minister, and I spent a lot of time listening to the police when I worked at the Home Office. So I do understand both sides of the argument. But let's come back to a different point here as well, slightly different. It's about the nature of our democracy. Can we protest peacefully, and can the police actively look after it and protect the protesters from the violent extremes that we're seeing? And then there's another aspect which is deeply, deeply troubling, protesting outside MPs' houses. Now, that is a form of intimidation. And I think if you have 50 people outside your house, whatever they're doing, whatever they're saying, if you have a single person, a woman in there on her own, or with young children, even with a man, even with Jeremy there, the potential for you to be intimidated and have your life impacted by those people does need to be thought about very, very carefully. And proper organisers will recognise that. The problem is we've got too many people on the fringe. That's where our efforts need to be.
I think that's a really good word. And I just want to, because you have worked in the Home Office and you have worked in Number 10, and I absolutely, and I'm sure Rosie does agree with you about the intimidation of MPs. For me, it's yes, they should do their own jobs, but what seems to be the grey area, for want of a better phrase, is the police's interpretation of laws, whether they're strong enough, whether the police have their own approach to all of this. Yeah. We go back to, going to make no apology, what was put on the side of Big Ben, the river to the sea, to 270,000 Jews in this country, in their mind, calls for the annihilation of the Jewish state. Right, to others, the police have said it's OK, it doesn't incite racial hatred. My point is, irrespective of your stance on that, right, I'll take both sides, the police there, right, don't tell me about numbers, were stood with their arms folded. Now, there is a fringe, and it's a really good word that you use. Why are the police not being more robust with that fringe? That's what I don't get.
Because we don't know exactly the context within which the police were policing that. Yep. I find as objectionable as you do, Jeremy, putting on the Houses of Parliament those sort of inflammatory statements. I object to it desperately. But I have to ask the copper on the beat, what was happening there? What were the circumstances? How many people did he have? What was he or she facing? And those circumstances where this is where we get great policemen. Now, we criticise the police a fair amount, and rightly so in some instances. The vast majority of police are dedicated public servants. They're there, not a politician. They're on the street. They're having to take an instant decision. And you can imagine the brickbats. Just go back to the King's coronation, when a number of people, the protesters, were actually apprehended by the police before anything had happened. And they were subject to incredible commentary and criticism from a number of people.
I would never disagree with you. That is absolutely no reason not to police in the right way.
Absolutely, they policed in the right way, but it was their decision on the spot to make a judgment. Not a politician, 400 yards away or a carriage. And we've got to give them some slack, because more often than not, they're going to get things right. And it's not just a question of being there. We have CPS lawyers in control rooms looking at situations. We've got CCTV. We have policemen who are looking at people there who could make arrests after the event. We've just had 3 people properly convicted for having those paraglider T-shirts around, which were inflammatory.
I guess in all of this, do you think we've got the balance right?
The balance is always going to change. And I think if we just say, overall, is the balance right? Maybe it is. But when you isolate incidents, we're always going to find something that somebody would have done in a different way.
I guess the difference with these protests they're taking, it's not like the King's coronation, which was a one-off event. We know every Saturday a demonstration like this is going to happen, and the same type of issues keep coming up. So maybe there could be more careful planning.
I would have thought a few token
Police
arrests would
before.
have been what they need to show people that's unacceptable.
Well, that's a judgment they have to take, Jeremy, and I'm not going to take it because I'm not the one who's going into a mob where I've seen a policeman, you know, who goes in to arrest somebody, suddenly being surrounded by 5, 10 other people.
But I'm old-fashioned, Jonathan. That's not good enough. The police are supposed to control the streets, not a mob.
Yes, the police do, but they may do it in a different way, or they may go in heavy, because sometimes you have to.
And I've come across these protests many times, and I'm not ever going to be subject to them. But I've never felt intimidated myself whenever I've come across these protests in central London. But I appreciate lots of people have done, and that's why it's caused this really contentious area. We're going to have to just pause there just for...
stay with us, Jonathan.
Final word, Jonathan, very quickly.
Rights, responsibilities come with them as well, and that's down to the people who organise the protests.
Absolutely.
Stay with us, pal.